to have you on the show. I don't know if you were listening to the president's speech, but he talked about the Calder fire in New York, Hurricane Ida leaving many dead in Louisiana. We know what state that's in. The massive flooding in the New York and New Jersey area. I mean, these are all kinds of scenes that scientists say the world will see more of because of human-caused climate crisis.
Absolutely. It's important to know that the events that hit Louisiana a few days ago, that hurricane re-intensified when it hit land. Usually hurricanes don't they usually die out when they hit land. But it re-intensified and it hit New York really hard last night. We saw flooding, subways flooded, we saw apartments flooded, we saw infrastructure at a standstill. And this is really a connected thing that's happening all over the US, all around the world. We're seeing more frequent extreme weather events because of climate change. And it's something that we need to reckon with now and adapt our cities to right now.
Explain to our viewers, I mean, we say it's related to climate change, but what is the role of climate change when it comes to these natural disasters that we're seeing more frequently and more severe?
Absolutely. You hit the nail right on the head there. With the climate change, we have a warmer atmosphere, and these events, they really feed off that warming and that intenseness. And so what we're going to see in future that climate scientists have been studying is that we're going to see things like hurricanes, things like bushfires, all of these extreme weather events become more frequent and more intense. Over the last 50 years or so in New York, our rainfall levels have increased 70%. So while last night was a historic rainfall levels that we saw here, it's not a once-off thing. We're seeing it more and more as time goes on in New York in terms of storms. And on the West Coast, somewhere like California, they're seeing more frequent fires. In my home country of Australia, they're seeing more frequent fires. So we're starting to see, because of climate change, the intensity and frequency of these extreme weather events and the devastation that comes with them increase drastically.
Tell me this. As an activist, are you hopeful that these events that we're seeing across the nation, whether the wildfires in California or the hurricanes in the Gulf or the flash flooding in the North Atlantic, are you hopeful that these will become prime examples for countries around the world, but mainly in the United States, to act on climate change?
So the one thing that really brings me hope is that we do have a strong movement of climate activists. We've seen millions of people march around the streets led by youth activists over the last few years. We've seen unprecedented levels of activism around climate change. So I don't think people know that we're experiencing climate change right now already. I think that's quite clear from the public all around the world. So I don't think more extreme weather events are necessarily going to change that, because we have a lot of people out there already. But of course, as time goes on, we'll see that movement grow. But what's really important right now is that we hold the people accountable, people who are responsible for this. Fossil fuel companies who are the polluters in the first place and causing this climate change, triggering extreme weather events, and these governments who are not doing enough. They haven't enough. They're not keeping fossil fuels in the ground. They're not enacting policies that keep our communities protected. There's a big meeting in Glasgow later this year called COP26, and that's another important opportunity where world leaders will come together to set their climate change targets over the next few years. And right now, we need them not to go easy there. We need them to understand the seriousness of this situation, looking at these pictures in New York and all around the world this year, in Europe, in Australia, and make sure that they commit to tangible, real action that happens really fast to transform our societies.
Lucky, I mean, it's sad to say this, but the events that we're talking about is happening in one of the world's richest nations, but yet the biggest countries that are suffering the brunt of this are poorer nations. How do we actually get more attention to the people that are suffering the most?
I think that's a really important point. In fact, I think climate change is one of the largest moral catastrophes of our time because the people who contributed to it least are suffering from it the most. And I think it's important to make sure that we talk to activists, to people who are the most impacted on the ground. We're using social media to do this. We're connecting movements to do this. We're using the media to do this. We need to hear the stories of those who are impacted, because by hearing the stories who are most impacted, we understand what sort of changes we need to make in society. So it's important that we listen to those stories and take action.
All right, March for Science's Lucky Tran. Thank you very much for joining us. I do appreciate it.